Hi everybody, Ruth here again, and wanting to share a little bit with you today about this next portion of Oratorio Terezin. And I wanted to begin today by sharing with you two things that happened before the very first performance of the Oratorio, which was in November 2003 here in Toronto. I really felt that I needed to visit Terezin and to visit Auschwitz and to play my violin in both places. And so a dear friend of mine from the Netherlands had agreed to and offered to drive me from the Netherlands through to Czechia and then through to Poland to Auschwitz. And so we did this trip, and it was quite an amazing thing. We arrived in Terezin, and it was a beautiful sunny day, which just seemed wrong to me. No, on this day, it needs to be cloudy and rainy and just nothing of beauty. But there was beauty all around in nature. And this was such a contradiction somehow. Anyway, we walked around it's a very small town. It was a garrison town where they housed the army before the war. And so it was then taken over by the Nazis, and it was used as a place to hold the Jewish people. And amongst those Jewish people, many, many thousands of children had passed through Terezin. It was a way station, basically, to the death camps. Although it wasn't made out to be that way. It was also a propaganda tool for the Nazis to say, look how well we are treating the Jewish people. So we walked around a little bit, and I'm looking for where I'm going to play my violin. And then finally, we came across a little corner, a little grassy corner with a beautiful chestnut tree right in the middle of it. And so I said, this is where I want to play. And so we went over there, and we kind of sat down on the grass for a bit, and I was laying down on the grass and looking up through the tree, through the leaves, and the sunshine was coming down. And I didn't quite know how this was going to work or what I was going to do. And then finally I thought, okay, so I'm going to play. So I took my violin out of its case. But I couldn't even bring the violin to put it underneath my chin. It was the strangest thing. It was as though there was something inside of me that had been sucked out of me, and I had nothing to play. I had no music. There was nothing coming to me, because usually I just pick up the violin and I just play. It's the most natural thing to me. It's like me talking to you, probably even more natural than that. And I waited, and I couldn't put the violin under my chin. I definitely had nothing to play. So I knelt down on the grass. I put the violin down, and I just waited, and my friends prayed for me. And then I felt like I heard God say, play the cry, play the cry. Whoa. And so I picked up the violin, and I literally had to force my bow onto the string. And at first it was very, very tentative. Then slowly it began to come. I'll never forget it. I'll never forget that feeling. It was though the Lord was allowing me to touch that feeling of having everything sucked out of you, having no song anymore, and to just touch that. What is interesting is that afterwards, when we were looking at the map of Terezin, how it is now and how it was at the time when it was a concentration camp, or a ghetto, really. It wasn't a concentration camp. And realized that it was actually a place, it was right where they had built a children's playground as part of their propaganda, and they made a movie, and they'd built a playground to convince the Red Cross when they came to visit, to see, to make sure that this was all legit and nothing wrong was going on. So the Nazis made a propaganda movie. This particular place I had felt to play was the children's playground, which of course was destroyed right after the Red Cross moved out. So that was amazing, really, to realize that God had led me there. The next day, after spending overnight somewhere in between Terezin and Auschwitz, the next day we visited Auschwitz, and we arrived there very early in the morning, and there was nobody, absolutely nobody there. We had the whole place to ourselves. I'll never forget it. And it was such a different experience. We arrived at the gates, you know, the well-known gates with the railway track running right there through, coming right into the camp. And as we walked through, I felt the Lord saying to me, Ruth, I will make everything right. This was not what I expected to hear in Auschwitz. It was a very different experience. It was an experience of absolute hope and trust that all that had happened, God will make everything right. And this was a very, very strong feeling. And so when I chose, I knew where I wanted to stand. I wanted to stand right on those train tracks, looking down to the far end of the camp, where the gas chambers were. So I got my violin out, and as I began to play, the only verse that came into my mind was, "For Zion's sake I will not keep silent, for Jerusalem's sake I will not rest until her vindication shines out like the dawn and her salvation like a burning torch." Those were the words in my mind. It was like a declaration as I began to play on my violin. It was just a totally different and amazing experience. So, you know, God speaks to us in such surprising ways, and he adjusts our situations in ways that we would have never thought. We would think, no, it's supposed to be this way, but God says, no, it's this way. It's this way. So that was really amazing. We went directly from Auschwitz to Krakow, to some friends of my friend. And it was a Friday, so we arrived in time for a Shabbat meal. It was my first ever Shabbat meal. I'd never experienced it. Around the table sat quite a few Jewish people, and we shared a Shabbat meal together. I was sitting next to a couple, and Anna, a wonderful lady, an artist, and we got talking, and she showed me some of her paintings that she had on little cards. And then she shared with me her story of how she was on the train to Auschwitz with her mother. Of course, she didn't know where the train was heading, but the mother did. The mother had a clear sense of the fact that there was no chance that they would survive if they remained on that train. And so Anna's mother did what was unthinkable to any of us as mothers, but maybe not. She threw Anna somehow off the train. By God's grace and mercy, Anna was picked up by a Christian couple and taken in and kept and looked after. And that is how she survived the whole period of the war, of the Holocaust. An amazing story, really, gosh, very strong. So, this next portion of the oratorio is very much about longing. And it is about longing for home. It is about having this vision of home. The next song is a beautiful poem called The Butterfly, written by Pavel Friedmann, who was 22 when he wrote this, so not really a small child. And he just writes about this butterfly that he sees, a very beautiful butterfly, and how he sees this butterfly, and then the butterfly flies away. And within the poem, he says, there's such a yellow, he's talking about a yellow butterfly. It's carried lightly way up high. It went away, I'm sure, because it wished to kiss the world goodbye. It's an amazing thought. And the child, or Pavel, writes about finding beauty even in the ghetto, the dandelions, the white chestnut branches, very much where I'm thinking of when I played the violin. And then he finishes, only I never saw another butterfly. That butterfly was the last one. Butterflies don't live here in the ghetto. What a statement. If you look, I have included a beautiful sculpture, a picture of a beautiful sculpture, which is part of a larger sculpture called The Fountain of Tears by my friend Rick Winnicky. And Rick was very much part of this whole journey when we were in Europe. Rick lives in Israel with his wife Daphna. And if you want to know more about Fountain of Tears, then just Google Fountain of Tears, you'll find it, by Rick Winnicky. And the sculpture is of a small child in one of the ovens of Auschwitz, obviously where they burned the bodies afterwards. But here it looks like a living child, and the child is kind of curled up. And the hand of the child somehow penetrates the door of the oven, and on the other side of the door of the oven is a plot of ground. And you see there on the plot of ground, you see a butterfly. And you see the child's hand grasping this plot of ground which is actually covered with olive leaves. And the whole sense that somehow, out of all of this, the land of Israel, even though the child didn't see the butterfly there on the ground, the land of Israel was what came from this whole period of the Holocaust and created somehow the opportunity for Israel to return to their land, to the land of Israel. So I hope that makes sense how I've described it, but it's hard to do that without the sculpture right in front of you, and that's why I've added it at the beginning of this video. The next song is another poem. This is an anonymous poem, so almost presumably the child did not survive. And this is really a poem of longing for home. It says, "Ah, home, home, why did they tear me away? Here the weak die easy as a feather, and when they die forever." And then this next stanza is so beautiful. I'd like to go back home again. It makes me think of sweet spring flowers. Before, when I used to live at home, it never seemed so dear and fair. I remember now those golden days, but maybe I'll be going there soon. That's very much the feel of that poem, is that longing for home. And then the next poem is also longing for home. I look into the wide world. This is by František Bas, who wrote this. He was 11 years old or somewhere around there, 11 or 12 years old, deported to Terezin in 1941, and he died in Auschwitz in 1944. So he was obviously in Terezin for a while. I look into the wide world, into the wide distant world. I look to the southeast, which would be Prague. I look toward my home. I look toward my home, the city where I was born. City, oh my city, I will gladly return to you. Again, this longing for home. But then it kind of changes, because we now hear the longing of God for his people. And this is from Hosea chapter 11. "When Israel was a child, I loved him, and out of Egypt I called my son. The more I called them, the more they went from me." It's such a central theme in the life of the Jewish people, the sense of God bringing them by his hand out of Egypt, out of slavery. But there's this sense of God saying, the more I called them, the more they went from me. Boy, how much we are like that. How much I am like that. I want to always respond to God's call. And then from Song of Solomon, chapter 2, "Arise, my love, my fair one, and come away with me. For now the winter is past, the rain is over and gone. The flowers appear on the earth, the time of singing has come, and the voice of the turtle dove is heard in our land." It's like spring is coming. And so I just really encourage you to listen to these words, and as you listen to the music, to pray and to affirm your own faith that spring is coming. And I think for me, how do I communicate that spring is coming? how do I communicate that hope to a people who have experienced so much loss, so much pain, and that even surviving the Holocaust can be pain in itself, because there's a sense of guilt somehow of surviving when others didn't, and especially of family members that didn't. I had a dear friend who he was sent to the camps with his sister, and his sister was younger than him. He was the big brother. He was supposed to look after his sister. That's how he felt. But his sister was killed. But he survived. Can you imagine living with that as a child? That somehow you weren't able to protect your little sister. So there's this pain that in a sense doesn't go away. The only one who can heal that pain is God himself. And even the healing, there's always the wound. I don't think our wounds ever go away. And often our wounds can be a gift to others who are wounded, who are in pain. So let's turn our wounds and our pain, let's turn them over to God and enter in to the depth of his longing for his people Israel, and for all of us, that we will come to him and that we will turn to him in our time of need. Bless you all. I hope that this is helpful and has been helpful to you. Every blessing. Bye-bye.
The voice of the